Breaking news into First Take. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, the Broncos are trading for Miami wide receiver Jaylen Waddle.
I feel you on that. I just think that, you know what, you go and get a quarterback and then you move their primary weapon. What does that say?
It looks clean on paper, but the moment you dig deeper, it gets dangerous. One team is sacrificing the present for a bigger future, the other looks unstoppable. But too much perfection can break a team. And what's hiding in the shadows of this trade? Stick around, because the real story will blow your mind. Let's slow it down for a second and look at what actually happened, because on the surface, it looks clean, simple, even logical. Jaylen Waddle is now a Denver Bronco. In return, Miami gets a first-round pick, plus additional mid-round picks. A classic move, right? A rebuilding team gives away a star receiver to stack draft capital, while a contender loads up for a Super Bowl push. That's the story everyone is telling, and honestly, it sounds believable. Waddle is not just any receiver. He's a game breaker. We're talking about a guy who put up over 900 yards even in a messy season, with multiple 1-0-0-0 yard seasons before that. Speed, separation, explosiveness, everything you want in a modern NFL offense.
Big breaking news into First Take. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, the Broncos are trading for Miami wide receiver Jaylen Waddle. So this trade package, Denver receives Waddle and the Dolphins' 4th-round pick in a 2026 draft. Miami gets the Broncos' 1st-round pick, which is 30th overall, along with their late 3rd and 4th-round picks, 30th in each round in this year's draft.
And that's where things start to feel a little too perfect. Because when you hear insiders break it down, it almost sounds like a textbook win for both sides. Denver gets their missing piece, Miami gets future assets, and everyone walks away happy. But the more you listen, the more you realize something isn't lining up.
Laura, a major trade between the Miami Dolphins and the Denver Broncos that sends Jaylen Waddle to the Broncos, a team that have been looking out for him since the trade deadline last year. Denver gives up a 1st-round draft pick, the 30th overall pick in this year's draft, along with a 4th-round selection. And in return, the Broncos get back Waddle here, draft pick swap. Jaylen Waddle becomes the newest weapon for Sean Payton and his offense. The Dolphins get back 3 picks in this particular trade, a 1, 3, and a 4. And the rebuild in Miami is underway here.
See that word right there, rebuild. It sounds safe, it sounds logical, but in the NFL, rebuild is often just a cover word for something much more aggressive happening behind the scenes. Because here's the reality. When a team looks like the obvious winner on paper, history tells us that's exactly when things start to go wrong. On paper. Broncos won big. But in the NFL, obvious winners usually aren't the real winners. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the timing of this move makes no sense at all. Miami just brought in Malik Willis, a new quarterback, a fresh start, a guy you're supposed to build around. And then, just days later, you trade away his best weapon? That's not just questionable, that's almost self-sabotage. Because no matter how talented a quarterback is, he can't throw the ball to himself. He needs someone to get open, someone to make plays. And you just removed that guy.
I feel you on that. I just think that, you know what, you go and get a quarterback and then you move their primary weapon. What does that say?
Sure.
You know, I mean, it's some things are just that simple. Like you're Malik Willis, here you are, you've been waiting to be a starting quarterback in the National Football League for some time. You get $67 million, they invest in you, they say you're our guy moving forward. You're the starting quarterback for this team. And oh, by the way, a week later, we gonna get rid of your number 1 wide receiver. I mean, that's kind of hard to stomach.
And that right there is the moment where the story cracks. Because this isn't bad planning. This feels intentional. Like the Dolphins are not trying to win right now, and maybe they don't want to. So now we zoom out, and suddenly the bigger picture starts forming. Miami isn't just making one move, they're stacking moves. Draft picks are piling up, the roster's being stripped down piece by piece, new coach, new management, new direction. Everything is being reset at the same time. And when that happens in the NFL, it's never random. It's planned, carefully planned.
They are loaded with picks here in the upcoming draft. They are really starting to add a lot of ammunition. They have 4 third-round picks, 2 first-round picks, And then obviously they have more players that they could potentially wind up dealing. I think a lot of people will wonder, could Devon Achane here be had for a certain amount of compensation? I'm sure the Dolphins would listen on anybody right now. Why wouldn't they in the mode that they're in? If they're willing to deal Waddle, clearly they have to be at least open-minded about virtually any other player on their roster. It's a new head coach in Jeff Hafley, a new general manager in John Eric Sullivan, and clearly they're going to do things their way. They're going to start to rebuild. They're going to do things over. They're going to make their mark their way, and there you have it. They, being the Dolphins, as one of 5 teams.
But here's the question nobody is asking. What if this isn't just a rebuild? What if this is a controlled collapse? Because there's a difference between losing while trying to get better and losing on purpose to position yourself for something massive. Think about it. More draft picks, weaker current roster, no real pressure to win now. That's the perfect setup if your real goal isn't this season, but the next one, or even the one after that. And once you start looking at it like that, this trade stops looking normal. It stops looking safe. It starts looking strategic, almost surgical. Like every move is setting up something bigger that hasn't happened yet. This might not be a rebuild. This might be step 1 of something much bigger. Now this is where everything flips. Because if you stop looking at the Dolphins as a rebuilding team and start looking at them like a front office executing a long-term strategy, suddenly every move starts making sense. Trading Waddle is not just about picks. It's about timing. It's about control. It's about choosing when to be bad so you can be unstoppable later. Because in the NFL, the worst place to be is average. Not bad enough for top picks, not good enough to win. And Miami clearly doesn't want to stay stuck in that middle zone anymore. And once you accept that, the idea of a planned collapse doesn't sound crazy anymore. It sounds smart. Think about it. Stack draft picks, clear expensive contracts, lower expectations, and quietly position yourself for a future quarterback class that could change everything. Because insiders are already hinting at something bigger down the road. Not next season, but the one after that.
They certainly have enough draft picks that they could look to add an additional quarterback in the 2027 draft that is considered today to be quarterback rich. So again, you can't throw away everything. You've got to field a team and you've got to try to win games, and they're trying to do that, but they felt the value here by getting 3 draft picks back in return for a player who was already being paid a lot of money, who's already been around for a little while, was worth the gamble for this team to take at this time.
The Dolphins are building for 2028, so this is the right decision for them, even though Waddle's a very good player.
Now, read that again carefully. Building for 2028. That means everything happening right now is not about winning games. It's about setting up a future where they dominate. And if that's the case, then losing today is not failure. It's part of the design. And it gets even more interesting when you realize just how many assets they've collected to make that happen.
They've got 7 picks in the first 3 rounds of this year's draft. They can start building towards something. So when you're doing that, if you're telling us you're tanking to try to go get a top quarterback in next year's draft, why don't you just roll with Quinn Ewers? I'm having a really hard time understanding the justification for $67.5 million for Malik Willis. The dead cap for Tua. Yes, I know it's a post-June 1 cut. You can spread it out over 2 years. Why make your financial situation that much more complicated when the easiest path here would have been just to go with what you had on the roster, because it probably would have ensured a pretty bad record regardless?
Yeah, so I think the question is fair. My answer would be players and coaches never tank. Front offices do.
7 picks in just the first 3 rounds. That's not normal. That's not random. That's ammunition. That's a front office preparing to control the board, control the draft, and control their future. And when you connect all of this together, trading Waddle, stacking picks, weakening the current roster, it doesn't look like a mistake anymore. It looks like a calculated reset designed to hit at the perfect moment. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The Dolphins might not be trying to compete right now. They might be trying to lose the right way. Not careless losing, but controlled losing. Losing with purpose. Losing with a plan. Because if it works, they don't just rebuild. They take over the league. This isn't losing. This is positioning. But while Miami is quietly stepping back, Denver is doing the exact opposite. They're going all in. And at first glance, it looks dangerous. In a good way. Because now you add Jaylen Waddle to an offense that already had solid pieces. And suddenly everything clicks. Speed, depth, explosiveness, it's all there. On paper, this looks like the move that pushes a team from contender to favorite. And analysts are not even hiding it. They're openly calling this roster one of the best in the entire conference.
It was the number one hole for this football team. This is a championship caliber roster, and there's a case to be said. They don't really have a hole outside of like that true number one receiver that's a vertical guy. Courtland Sutton's been their number one guy, very good player, but he's a big-bodied person. And then you have younger players like Franklin and Bryant, but they're not really at that level. And Mims is a dynamic kind of gadget guy. Jaylen Waddle's a one. And so this makes so much sense for Denver, because if you're Denver, you're sitting there at the 30th pick.
And when you hear that, it feels like the story is already written. Denver fixed their biggest weakness. They added the missing piece. They're ready to win now. But that's exactly where things start to feel dangerous. Because in the NFL, when a team looks too complete, too balanced, too perfect, that's usually when cracks begin to form. And it's not just hype. Even the expectations are being pushed to extreme levels.
It is a huge pickup, Dan, and I think that it legitimately elevates them potentially to the number one team in the AFC. Remember, they were in the AFC Championship game last year. We keep forgetting they had 68 sacks, 4 shy of an all-time record by the Chicago Bears in 1984-85. We keep forgetting that, okay? Their defense was legit. They got after the quarterback better than anybody in football. They lost an AFC Championship game 10-7 because Jarrett Stidham was your quarterback instead of Bo Nix, who had gotten hurt near the end of the Buffalo divisional playoff game right there.
Number one in the AFC. That's not a small statement. That's pressure. That's expectation. That's a target on your back before the season even begins. And history has shown again and again, teams that are labeled unstoppable before they prove it often collapse under their own weight. Because football is not played on paper. It's played under pressure, under expectations, under chaos. So now the real question starts forming. Are the Broncos building a champion or setting themselves up to fail? And this is where the hidden risk nobody is talking about starts to show. Because adding talent is easy. Managing it is not. More weapons means more expectations. More expectations means more pressure. And pressure breaks teams. Because now you have multiple receivers who want the ball, a quarterback who has to keep everyone happy, and a system that suddenly has no room for mistakes. And on paper, it sounds exciting, but in reality, it can get messy very fast.
It's Waddle for a 1 and a 3. That's the trade where he goes to Denver. Waddle now teams up with Courtland Sutton to give the Broncos a pair of big-time playmakers along with Pat Bryant and Marvin Mims and little Jordan Humphrey and some other wide receivers that they have out there. The Miami Dolphins, their wide receiver room essentially is stripped down.
That's not just depth, that's overload. And overload creates competition. Competition creates frustration, and frustration creates cracks. Because when everyone expects to shine, someone ends up disappointed. And when that happens inside a team chasing a championship, things don't stay quiet for long. And that's why this move, as perfect as it looks, carries a hidden risk that most people are ignoring. Because sometimes more talent doesn't fix problems, it creates new ones. Sometimes more talent creates more problems. Now, step back for a second. Because this trade is not just about Miami or Denver anymore. This is where things start getting bigger and uncomfortable even. Because when a move like this happens, it doesn't stay contained, it spreads. It forces reactions, it changes how other teams think, how they plan, and how they move. And right now, there are teams across the AFC looking at this deal and realizing they just got left behind. Because while Denver made the move, some teams hesitated. And hesitation in the NFL usually costs you.
The team that really resonates with me, Dan Orlovsky, is Buffalo. You got DJ Moore. He ain't Jaylen Waddle. I like Moore. He ain't Waddle. Remember, Buffalo had a chance to get Waddle. If you're willing to give up the first round pick, they're willing to give it up in 2027, okay? They're willing to give it up. Buffalo insists that it doesn't want to give up the pick in 2027, in 2026. They'd rather give it up in 2027. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You got Josh Allen there, and you got a chance to get Jaylen Waddle, and you miss out on that? This is a big deal to me.
And that right there creates pressure, not just on Buffalo, but on everyone. Because now the question becomes, if Denver is loading up like this, what are you going to do about it? Sit back? Wait? Hope it works out? That's not how this league operates. When one team makes a bold move, others are forced to respond. And that's where the domino effect begins. Because now, teams start overthinking, overpaying, making rush decisions just to keep up. And once that starts, control is gone. The league shifts into chaos mode. Because this trade isn't isolated, it's contagious. And the first place you see that chaos is the wide receiver market. Because one trade doesn't just move one player. It resets value across the entire league. And suddenly, every top receiver becomes more expensive. Every negotiation becomes more aggressive. And every front office starts asking the same question. If Waddle is worth this, then what about the elite names?
If Waddle's going for the 1, and you said the 3 and 4 pick, Waddle?
Yep.
What's A.J. Brown going to cost? Because if Jaylen Waddle, really nice player, I think we could all agree that A.J. Brown is a more dominant player. If Waddle went for a 1 and you're New England and you thought you were in the A.J. Brown conversation, now what does the very clear asking price of A.J. Brown going to be?
And just like that, the market explodes. Because now it's not just about one trade anymore, it's about every trade that comes after it. Teams start panicking, prices go up, expectations go up, and suddenly one decision made by Miami and Denver starts rewriting how deals are done across the NFL. And when the market loses balance like that, it doesn't stabilize quickly. It spirals. It creates mistakes, and those mistakes change seasons. Now, imagine this scenario. And it sounds crazy at first, but stay with it. Denver goes all in. The hype builds, the expectations rise. Everyone calls them the best team in the AFC. But then, something small goes wrong. Maybe it's chemistry, maybe it's pressure, maybe it's one injury at the wrong time, and suddenly, the perfect team doesn't look so perfect anymore. They drop a few key games. Confidence starts shaking. The locker room feels different. And before anyone realizes it, the season slips away. Not a total collapse, but just enough to miss the moment they were built for. Now, flip the other side. Miami struggles, but not by accident. Losses stack up, but every loss moves them higher in the draft. Higher position, better control. And when the season ends, they're sitting at the top. Not as a failure, but as a team holding the keys to the future. And then it happens. They draft a generational quarterback. A player that resets everything, a player that makes every sacrifice worth it, and suddenly, the same team people called lost becomes the most dangerous team in the league. Imagine that. The team that traded Waddle wins everything. Now, connect everything together, because this is where the real picture shows itself. Miami trades a star receiver, weakens their current roster, stacks draft picks, and quietly shifts focus to the future. Denver loads up, builds a powerhouse, and takes on massive expectations immediately. And the rest of the league gets caught in the middle, reacting instead of controlling. And when you look at it like that, this doesn't feel like a simple trade anymore. It feels like two completely different strategies colliding at the same time. One team playing the long game, the other betting everything on right now.
They're not going to win the division this year. Breaking news, right? So you might as well start gearing up for 2027 and beyond. And that's what they're doing by moving off a player like Jaylen Waddle, who obviously had suitors all during the season last year at the trade deadline. The Broncos tried to get him. The Bills made calls on him. The Dolphins got offers then. Previous regime, new regime comes in. And now Jaylen Waddle, obviously, you're listening again.
That right there is the closest thing to the truth we've heard. Because if Miami already knows they're not winning now, then everything they're doing is about what comes next. And if Denver is pushing everything into this moment, then the pressure on them is higher than anyone is admitting. And that's why this trade feels different. Because it's not just about players. It's about timing. It's about risk. It's about control. And depending on how it plays out, this trade might go down as genius. Or the biggest mistake in NFL history. This trade might already have decided the future of the NFL. So now the question is simple, but the answer isn't. Who really won this trade? The team that got the star player, or the team that gave him away? Because one is chasing success right now, and the other might be building something that no one can stop later. And if everything we just talked about actually plays out, then what looks obvious today will look completely different tomorrow. So tell me, do you think the Broncos just built a Super Bowl team, or walked into a trap? And if the Dolphins are really planning something bigger, are we watching the start of the next NFL powerhouse? Because if the Broncos fail, remember this video.